Good afternoon. I would like to welcome all of you to Aker Solutions and welcome to the energy transition. My name is Duarte Trindade. I'm the head of performance and transformation in Aker Solutions Brazil, and I'm proud to be here today with all of you present in Curitiba, but also to all the guests that are joining us online. This is a remarkable day to our industry, and you are all part of this important transformation. The energy transition has already started, and decarbonization is already a reality. And we, as players in the industry, need to continue to collaborate and discuss together important topics that sooner or later will impact our lives and will conduct and make business moving forward. After COP26, several discussions took place in Brazil in order to intensify the creation of a carbon market that have resulted to a recent decree publication. Today, in this forum, the main objective of the panel discussion is to bring more awareness of the challenges and opportunities to introduce the carbon market in Brazil and all the surrounding aspects, and with the diverse insights and covering several lenses of the society. And especially for that, we are welcoming some brilliant professionals to engage in this discussion with me. I welcome Professor Ronaldo Saroa da Mota from the State University of Rio de Janeiro, also Heloísa Borges, Director of the Oil and Gas and Biofuels Divisions at the Energy Research Office, and Isabel Ramos, the Carbon Market Manager at Petrobras. And we will have the opportunity to briefly hear our guest speakers, to expose their topics, their ideas, and after we will have a brief panel discussion with some questions. Please use our Slido to address the questions or vote on the preferred ones. But prior to deep dive on the Brazil scenario, I will take the opportunity to start this conversation with a brief market and technology drop about CCS at Aker Solutions. That could bring some insights to kickstart the forum. Aker Solutions, it's well known in Brazil by the subsea technology and services, as well by the topside and maintenance and modification business. But Aker Solutions globally, it's much more than that. Almost 2 years ago, we had a spin-off from Aker Solutions to create the Aker Carbon Capture as a pure-play carbon capture company with solutions, services, and technologies, and maintaining Aker Solutions as the engineering, procurement, and construction execution arm. The world market outlook really supports the CCS growth. The last report for the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change clearly states that we need CCS and carbon dioxide removals as an important technology to mitigate climate change. Also, the 2050 Net Zero Pathway report from the International Energy Agency identifies that such technology needs to grow between 8 to 11 times more over the next 8 years in order to attend the world needs of carbon removals. This will represent 4 times more investment in CCS technology until 2025. Aker have a proprietary carbon capture technology that offers a unique environmentally friendly solution for removing CO2 emissions. We have 3 main offerings that basically vary in terms of capture capacity, from 40 until more than 400 kilotons per year of CO2 removal. This on the onshore and offshore environment. And this is done also in 3 main delivery models: the execution of the EPC itself, the licensing of technology, but also providing carbon capture and storage as a service. For the moment, we are concentrating our activity in the Northern European markets with some opportunities emerging in US. And why these markets? Because basically due to their level of maturity. But we are keeping an eye on the other markets as they develop. Brazil, it's definitely in our radar. We also have 4 prioritized industries: cement industry, bio-waste to energy, gas to power, and blue hydrogen. And we start engaging with new industry segments like pulp and paper and also the smelting. And in reality, we are making this happening. Means that we are taking several projects out of the PowerPoint presentations and making happen in reality. And here I'm just sharing 4, I would say, flagship projects from Aker. The first one, it's the Breivik Salmon project from Norcem in Norway that we have the opportunity to see during the morning that is connecting to the Northern Lights. And it's a salmon plant that will have an annual capacity to capture 400,000 tons of CO2. We also have our Twence plant in Angelo that converts 1 million tons of waste to energy every year, supplying more than 100 people in the eastern parts of Netherlands with heating and electricity. And our project will have an annual capacity to capture 100,000 tons of CO2. We have also a recent award for executing a FEED study, I would say a pioneer FEED study. It's in a technology consortium with Siemens Energy and also Dawson Babcock for the net zero Teesside power. That will be the first world's commercial scale gas-fired power station with carbon capture. And will be the hub of a decarbonized group of industries, Teesside in UK, who will share the CO2 transportation and storage infrastructure. Quite similar concept as the one that we saw in Northern Lights. And we will have a capacity to capture 2 million tons of CO2 per year. The last project that I would like to share, it's on the blue hydrogen. That is a project in a Prem refinery in Sweden that we are piloting the capture from the flue gas of a steam methane reformer, where Aker's proprietary technology was validated after 3,000 operating hours of tests. And now we are developing a feasibility study for a 4,000 tons capture unit. In conclusion, we in Aker Solutions strongly believe on CCS technology, and it's possible to achieve CCS technology break-even with a full-scale deployment. But this is only be possible if companies start to internalizing an important and negative climate externality caused by their carbon emissions. For that to happen, it's crucial to create the right climate instruments and guarantee the worldwide alignment also to avoid carbon leakage. In the beginning of the year, the European carbon credit markets almost touch 100 euros per ton of CO2, trending now around 83 euros. Some carbon capture as service projects are already economically viable above 70 euros per ton of CO2. And if we take in consideration the sustainable development scenario for the International Energy Agency that is requiring 120 euros per ton until 2030, we foresee a bright future for the CCS technology. And to have conversations such this one with different agents and also with different insights, it's one of the many ways to start. So, without further delays, let me introduce our guest speakers that will join me on this conversation. First, from my right to the left, I have Ronaldo Saroa da Mota, Professor of Economics at the State University of Rio de Janeiro, with a PhD in Economics at the University College London. He's also a former director of the Ministry of the Environment and a former lead author and also a review editor of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, with a certificate of the Nobel Peace Prize awarded in 2007 to IPCC. Professor Ronaldo will present us some insights about carbon markets and also the Brazil climate policies. Professor, thank you very much to be here with us today. After we will have Luísa Borges. She holds a PhD master degree and also a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She's also a fellow at Columbia Humans Leadership Program from the Columbia University. Luísa served in several positions in the Brazilian public administration and joined the National Agency for Petroleum, Natural Gas and Biofuels in 2005, when an extensive work performed for the successfully Brazilian bidding rounds held by the agency. Since May 2020, Luísa joined the Energy Research Office as the Director for Oil, Natural Gas and Biofuel Studies Division. Luísa will share with us today some insights about the energy mix in Brazil and how important is the oil and gas industry, but from both sides, you know, from the energy security perspective, but also looking for the decarbonization process. Luísa, again, it's an honor to have you here with us also today. The third guest speaker that we will have, it's Isabel Ramos. It's a carbon market manager at Petrobras, Petrobras in the climate change team. Isabel, it's an economist. As you can see him here, I'm the only engineer in the middle of 3 economists. Let's see how it goes. Graduated from PUC Rio with an exchange program at University of California, San Diego, and a master's degree also. Isabel has been with Petrobras for 70 years and currently represents the Petrobras in the Natural Climate Solutions Committee of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, OGCI. And Isabel will bring us, to us the Petrobras decarbonization pathway with some highlights of some low carbon solutions ahead of us. And now I will pass the word to Professor Ronald to make their exposition. Professor.
Hello, 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 yes. And good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm very pleased to be here with my colleagues. It's the first time you're doing this. Keep it rolling this show. And thank you very much also for the visit, because I was also touched about seeing you. And congratulations for your industrial achievements, because make us Brazilians, even not living Paraná, very proud. Okay, and today Duarte asked me to do something which is quite a challenge, to give you a broad picture about the carbon markets in Brazil, in the world, in Brazil, in 10 minutes. And it's not carbon markets in a very small nutshell. Okay. So forgive me if I skip and I keep the narrative without very much details, but that's the only way I hope I can meet the target of 10 minutes. I already spent 1 minute in excuses. So let's move on. Okay, so it's been said everywhere. We know IPCC has already made it very clear that we need to follow in energy transitions, and you see CCS, one of the key actions to be taken in order to follow this net zero pathway. And also hydrogen, like you do in Aker. So in energy transition, Aker is has an important role. It has been very successful in moving this ahead. And also natural-based solutions. This is the second trail. We needed to take actions in order to fulfill that goal of 1.5 degrees pathway, which IPCC is recommending. But that means that in 2030, I'm not talking about 2050, you needed to cut 40–50% of our emissions. And most of those emissions are coming from fossil fuel. So this is quite a challenge, and we know we need some public policies, because net zero cooperative policies is okay. It's something which perhaps Leonardo and I have been a long time in this road. You never thought in 2020 you would be seeing such a change in the world. Very surprised about the corporations making those speeches you heard today in the morning about sustainability. So that's very important, but public policy is needed. And public policy is needed because we need something which gives us a very clear pathway in order to decide how to do our investments. You cannot rely only in one or two major companies, and also those companies changing voluntarily because they are net zero voluntary. You need something mandatory. And then one of those actions that the government can take is carbon pricing. What does it mean, carbon price? Is something where you put a price, could be a tax, it could be a market, but there will be a price for emission. And that's very important because this is a very cost effective. Very cost effective. Why? Because those companies who can reduce carbon emissions with a very low cost, they will be the one to do first. And so you can meet the target, which is the overall target, through a least cost approach. So in that case, carbon price gives you opportunity to reach high ambition in reduction with the minimizing the cost of this trajectory. So we have taxes, I think in Norway, you are very fond of tax carbon. I'm not going to talk about taxation here. I'm being asked to talk about carbon market. That's the other way of doing carbon price. You know, also, I think the importance of talking about carbon market because we have in the Paris Agreement instruments for carbon market. We have in Europe a very important carbon market. In Brazil, people think about carbon market. So let's talk only about carbon market. But I don't, I'm not saying carbon tax are not important. That's also important. That's another way of doing. But carbon market is being much more effective doing covering sectors like the industrial sector, the energy production, where you can have a few major sources of emissions, which may cover 80–90% of the total emissions. So it's much easier to have a carbon market for those kind of sectors when you can take it to 20–80%. To say I can look at 20% of the sources and control 80% of the emissions. So we have the voluntary market. That's everybody very aware. You see everywhere in the papers. So companies, they need to buy, or people, individuals, they want to reduce their carbon footprint. So they buy compensations, offsets, and they buy credits. These credits they are made from projects. We have a project that are designed to reduce the level of emission according to a baseline. So I have a kind of activity, and my emissions is X tons per year, and now I'm going to reduce 10% of that emission, and that will give me the right of issuing credits. And I can sell the credits for someone who needs to meet their targets with that kind of reduction. I don't, so I sell to them. That's the voluntary market is already there for 15 years. And today, the turnover is about 1 billion. It's not much, but has been 300 million 3 years ago, although the price has not gone up. And that's one case. That's a very intriguing case, but I don't have time to discuss this. But anyway, the volume of trade has grown 200% in the last 3 years because of those kind of net zero decisions the companies are making. The second one is the international regulated market. What I mean by international regulated market? Those who are based on diplomatic conventions, like you have the Climate Convention, we have the Paris Agreement, and so like we had in Kyoto Protocol, which was the previous agreement we had in the Climate Convention, we had a market instruments there for countries who has, you know, you don't need to say that, but in those conventions, countries, they made a decision to have a target, a goal of reduction. And they can meet that goal by doing themselves the reductions, the removals, but also buying from some other countries who are willing to sell for them. In the Kyoto Protocol, some countries, they don't have that kind of goals, like Brazil, China, India, and other countries, they had targets to meet. And so we had the clean development mechanism, which was very important for the voluntary market. So until today, part of the trade in voluntary markets is with the CDM. And so the CDM has made quite a big change in the voluntary market, creating methodology much more scientifically based, and so on and so forth. But today, in the Paris Agreement, every country has a voluntary goal, which is the NEDC. And so in that case of the Paris Agreement, the market instruments will be quite different. In which way? First of all, if I sell something to someone used for their NEDC commitment, I have to adjust my commitment, my NEDC commitment up, because I cannot sell something used for my NEDC if someone else using also for their NEDC. So this NEDC corresponding adjustment is something that has been already decided in Glasgow. And so every country who will be willing to sell within the Paris Agreement, if Brazil sells 100 million tons, the NDC of Brazil has to be increased by 100 million tons. That is going to create a very narrow door for the supply of credit. So the third one is the second important decision in the Paris Agreement for the Glasgow Pact regarding the Article 6 of Paris Agreement, which is related to these market instruments, is that we have two instruments. One which is a contract between countries, so it's not based on credit. It's just a country who sells some outcome mitigations, and the countries, they decide how to do these reductions, how much they are going to pay, how much they are going to monitor, and that's a very open-ended contract, which is quite different for the second instrument, which is trade between entities, like the CDM, like in the voluntary market. One company sells carbon to other company. In that case, also the corresponding adjustment is needed, but there will be methodologies, new methodologies, which the convention you publish perhaps in 1 or 2 years, and then you have to do the certification like you do in the voluntary market, so in order to sell. So this is the market which is going to be big, because all the countries may be willing to participate on that, but the supply maybe is low, because the corresponding adjustment is going to make countries think twice before they sell, because once they sell, they have to increase their NDC. So prices may go by $100, $200 in that kind of market, which is quite different of the $5, $10 of the voluntary market of today. And the third one is this jurisdictional regulated market, which means one jurisdiction decides to have a market is completely different than the voluntary in this Paris Agreement market, which is not based on credit. It's just like this. We have an overall target, and that overall target is converted in allowances, emissions allowances. And we have no company, no country, sources of emissions within the scope of the market. They have to comply at the end of the year, saying, I emitted 10 tons, and I have 10 units of allowance, which unit is value 1 ton. So I have to make this kind of compliance, and I buy from the regulator some of those units, allowances, and also the regulator can give me for free, because they believe I needed that for competitiveness issues. So those are the three kinds, completely different. They may talk to each other. Of course, some credits from the voluntary market may be going now for the Article 6 in Paris Agreement. Some is jurisdictional regulated market, they allow some cases, 10% of your emissions don't need to be conform with allowance, but you can buy on the voluntary market. They may have some connection, but they have different structure, different regulations. So I talk about the prices and the future, and because of this increasing of numbers of companies with net zeros, with the Article 6, and also because of some countries around now, like China recently has created reducing carbon markets, you may have prices going much higher than we have today. Because today, as I told you, in the voluntary market, one of the only markets in place for credits, because Article 6 is not in place yet, is $5, $5, $10. Although in the regulated market of Europe, you may have $60, $70, $80. Okay, so prices may go up, and I was reading what Duarte is saying. The CCS is $70, $100. They will be viable in 10 years' time, because the predictions in 10 years' time, you must have for the pathway of 1.5, $100. Also, if you analyze supply and demand, you find out also, comparing marginal abatement cost curve, you may reach $100 easily in 2030. Of course, if you have a breakthrough technology somewhere in energy, you may change everything in this scenario. In case of Brazil, sorry, I'm going to to exceed a little bit.
Go ahead.
Okay, and in the case of Brazil, we have a bill in the Congress which we are proposing this jurisdictional market for Brazil. Has a bill which being based in several studies before. I have opportunity to work in both, and they come up with something which is very similar, which we see in Europe, in California, in China. Everywhere. China is quite different, but I mean in California, in Europe, and is a cap and trade, like the one I said. You have overall target allowances and so on and so forth. And then it's important, this bill, because it has been discussed for 6 years. Leonardo knows that very much, and is being also promoted by the industrial and the cooperative sector in Brazil. There have been several public consultations. Is there? The draft is good. We have some problems, with minor problems. I don't have time to talk about this, but it's there. It's very legitimized piece of legislation, but we have a surprise, not then because they organize, the event which the government announced this decree, and the government has proposed a decree with a completely different market system, which is based on credit. It's a national system based on credit. It's very singular. We haven't seen anything like this anywhere in the world. And as I mentioned to you, the bill was much based on the international experience. And also it's a decree, which all the lawyers is saying, look, this is a decree, can change overnight. So what kind of legal stability, security you're going to give for investment? I myself have sometimes some kind of concern that those sectors who are trying to produce credit, trying to do investment, they now may stuck and say, look, what's going to be the sectoral target? How is going to be the implementation of this decree? Which is completely different, the bill, because the bill has, everybody knows already how to do it, because it has been a very long discussion. But in Brazil, we have also other things, which is leading for Brazil for net zero or for low carbon transition, which is very much also similar, which some countries in Europe, United States, UK, Europe, United States, Canada, they are already also proposing. So before that, I'd like to talk about two things we have in Brazil: the low carbon agriculture program, okay, and I don't know, it's a rural credit in Brazil, which gives some kind of a subsidy in terms of reduced interest rate for rural producers if they apply some low carbon practices for the agriculture. It's a very huge, it's billions of reais. Of course, in the last 3 years have been reduced, but anyway, it's there. Is a very important. I don't see any country with such a ambition like Brazil in low carbon agriculture. We have also Renova, which is already a market in Brazil. It's a carbon market with relative emissions, relative targets. It's not the absolute target like the overall target, but it's based on intensity, okay, which is not something what's a copy from California, the low carbon program there. And but Renova is not going to reduce emission, but it's going to reduce the intensity of emissions of the produce of biofuel in Brazil. Okay, it may reduce if the technological improvements is higher than scale effect of the demand. But you have also in Brazil, the central bank of Brazil, one of the first central banks in the world, they have asked the financial institutions, of course, they gave them 3 years of grace to put this in practice, climate stress in financial portfolio. So they needed to prove that kind of investment they are doing also is going to be viable in a climate disaster scenario, which is very important. Brazil is also a surprise, Brazil being a leader in this kind of approach. And also our SIC, the institution who takes care about the public entities, public companies in Brazil, okay, CVM, has also asked companies, open companies, to give some kind of sustainability metrics when they explain, present their ECG and the net zero targets. So Brazil has several pieces of climate policy. I'm afraid to say they don't talk to each other sometimes. They are not very much articulated. And I think we need in Brazil, perhaps in the future, something which put all this together and give them some alignments. Also, not only in goals, but also in instruments. Like we can't have like kind of this situation. We have a bill in the Congress ready to be approved, and then we have a decree, and so the credits, the low carbon credits is high, and the next year is low. You need something which gives it, like the Green Deal, like everywhere they are trying to do. And also, you don't need also, you should not to be also very much based on carbon pricing only. You should give more attention to R&D subsidies. You don't, to do the transition for low carbon, for net zero world, you need the carbon price, but also you need to deal another externality, which is the technological externality. You need to give subsidies. So in the kind of, the example we see here in Aker, you have a very high externality, technological externality. So that's a way of improving our capacity in technological development, also dealing with negative carbon price, which is the subsidy for those like you who are ahead in technological development. Thank you very much, and sorry about the 10 or 5 minutes, I don't know.
No, first of all,
I fail completely.
Thank you. No, thank you very much for the master class in carbon markets, and and to do that in a very simple language. I believe that it was quite. Thank you very much, Professor. Now we'll have Luisa that will, make their exposition.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the class. It was amazing.
Amazing.
I will start my presentation with a kind of controversial affirmative, and I beg you to bear with me until the end of the presentation. A decarbonized future is in no way a future without hydrocarbons. Keep that in mind. Do not forget that we will still need hydrocarbons for a long, long way. So we do need to think about energy transition. It has started. Decarbonization has started. But we cannot forget that we need hydrocarbons, and we will keep needing it for a long time. So how do we plan? That's the dual challenge. How do we decarbonize the oil and gas industry? How do we plan ahead for a future so far away that we cannot see? Have you all seen Marvel's Loki series? Yes, please say yes.
Yes, yes.
If not, don't say anything. But in each step we take, that's all about the Marvel's multiverse thing. Every step you take grants you a new, different possible future. The future has infinite possibilities. And the only certainty that we do have is that if we plan and try to forecast to 2100, 2115, how the world will look like, we will fail immensely. But given that, how do we plan? How do we plan for a future that we are not sure about, but that we know we have to do something so that we have a future to plan? It's complicated. Keep with me. I'll try to explain better. And that's my... So, I'll start with a Brazilian view of opportunities and perspectives. It's a well-known fact that Brazil has a very renewable electricity matrix, as Norway. Actually, Norway is more renewable than Brazil if you only look at electricity. But Brazil has a very renewable energy matrix. One of the main characteristics of the Brazilian matrix, it's not only our electricity, so hydro, biomass, but mainly biomass. If we look at our sugarcane products in our energy matrix, we are around 20% of sugarcane products alone. That's a lot. And that gives us something to think about. How do we plan for our future, considering that we are starting from a different point, a different perspective, a different starting point. Also, Brazil is a developing country. We will need lots of energy. The world will need lots of energy in the future to come. That future that I cannot forecast. One thing that I know for sure is that I will need energy. How do I guarantee the supply of that amount of energy that will keep growing with the less emissions possible? That's a huge challenge. Well, another thing is that we do have oil, and we plan to grow up and build up our energy strategy on that. Not only because the oil is there, you know, it's a fact, it's there, but not only because of that. Because we do believe that because of the way our energy matrix is, it's already is, and the way it's going to develop, and because of the characteristics of the Brazilian industry and perspectives, our oil can have a competitive advantage in that future with hydrocarbons. Keep that in mind. I started by saying that. Because one of the probable futures, possible futures, and what we do believe is that although we will need hydrocarbons, emissions, we will have to be accountable for our emissions. So in the future, the oil, the gas, the natural gas that we will use, we will consider not only the quality, sulfur content, but also the emission, the carbon footprint to produce that oil. So how do we position ourselves to be that country that can provide hydrocarbons with a low carbon footprint? That's the same for gas. So we see there's a huge ramp up on oil production in Brazil, mainly pre-salt. We will reach at least 5 million barrels per day by the end of the decade. In 2050, in our forecast, although oil production globally may vary, we still forecast that we'll keep up and reach at least 6 million barrels per day in our reference case scenario. Natural gas, the same. We have huge natural gas potential. We'll go from 130 million meters per day to almost double, 277 million cubic meters per day by the end of the decade, with potential to go further ahead by 2050. Those numbers, they are available. We have two main flagship studies at the Energy Research Office. I should have introduced myself better in the beginning. The Energy Research Office, we do energy planning, energy study, energy data for the Brazilian federal government. We have two flagship studies for those of you who are not familiar with EPE. First one is our 10-year energy plan, gives you our medium-term forecasts, and we have a 30-year energy plan, goes currently up to 2050. And how does the oil and gas decarbonization comes into our energy planning? Well, I started by saying that the decarbonized future is not a future without hydrocarbons. Why? Because when you think about energy transition, everybody thinks about electrification. Everybody wants to electrify everything. But energy transition, it's not only about electrifying everything. First of all, because electricity, it does has to come from somewhere. No, it doesn't magically appears. And secondly, because we have to think about other low carbon sources, there's long path to go there. Some sectors cannot be electrified. Lots of room for digitalization, technological innovations, sustainable development, and more efficient use of energy resources. Oil and gas can decarbonize and contribute with the decarbonization Firstly, and Isabel will build up on that with a low-cost, low-emission portfolio. But also, and that's like the low-hanging fruit, reducing leaks, venting, and burns. They're already doing that. We already see lots of that. Carbon capture and storage. First of all, and mainly because of the capabilities that are already there, makes the oil industry a great candidate for decarbonization through carbon capture and storage, and gives you a path in that uncertain future. The future 364 could be the future without hydrocarbons. How do we survive that future? You use your capabilities to transfer to a completely different activity. Steam recovery of equipment goes toward efficiency. You can make better use of your energy with recovery equipment, energy efficiency, reducing energy demand, zero carbon energy supply sources. And when we put all that in place, we start to thinking, okay, but that's not only about oil and gas. So we are looking at a broader picture. That broader picture is what we call sector coupling. Sector coupling is when we start looking at the energy sector in an integrated way. Not only electricity, not transportation, oil and gas, but a whole integrated energy system. And that's where we can start. I'm sorry, I'm going to stand up. That's where you can start. If we look here, I couldn't, I tried. I really did. If you look here, we can start thinking, okay, my future could be electrifying. Future for transportation could be electromobility. But well, we have to think, where does electricity come from? Could come from offshore solar, offshore wind, but could also come from gas. And that power could go into heating. But not only that, everything here could come from hydrogen. But this hydrogen is a green hydrogen, so you need green electricity to produce the hydrogen that could be fueling your cars instead of electricity. When we think about the capabilities of that future that we do not know how it's going to happen, the offshore oil and gas, you could use your capability. First of all, think about offshore wind electrifying your operations. Gas to wire coupled with offshore wind to produce energy. Hydrogen, you could gas to hydrogen, or you can, produce hydrogen by the biomass and then capture the carbon. Then you go back, take the carbon and storage. CCS, which is the great project that we came here today. But when you put everything together, we are seeing an integrated system, energy hubs, where we do not account for things individually, but we look at the energy as a great system. How do we make it more efficient? How do we optimize everything? For the oil and gas industry, it's essential that we start thinking and planning ahead to migrate the expertise toward lower carbon business and renewables. It will not happen today, but it might and probably will happen sometime in the future. But that future, we do not know what it's going to be like. Is it going to be offshore wind, synthetic fuel from algae, biomass? So that's why we are seeing several strategies from different companies. They are taking what they do better and trying to migrate that expertise. And I'm sorry, I'm way ahead of time. Here in Brazil, we have some ongoing public policies towards biofuels and low carbons that try to focus on that. So Professor Ronaldo already talked about RenovaBio, which is the policy for our carbon biofuels credit. Novo Mercado de Gás, which goes towards decarbonization using natural gas as a transition fuel. Abastece Brasil, efficiency in downstream. We have 2 ongoing programs, National Hydrogen Program, which has a low carbon hydrogen approach, technological agnostics, and Fuel of the Future, which is looking towards electromobility, synthetic fuels, hydrogen. And one example of that is a roadmap that we did for natural gas and biomethane for heavy duty trucks and buses. I'll jump ahead just to came back to explain RenovaBio a little bit better. What RenovaBio does, it sets targets for companies that sells fossil fuels. So if you sell fossil fuel, if you're a distributing company, you have to compensate the fossil fuels emission by acquiring carbon credits from the biofuels producers. The idea is that in time, that credit will allow biofuel production to be each time more efficient, more competitive, so that way you can foster biofuels as a decarbonization tool for our transportation matrix. But there are lots and lots of plans included in that. As a final remark, I would like to ask you to keep in mind that I started by agreeing with Duarte that we are experiencing an energy transition. Decarbonization has already started, and the energy systems will follow that decarbonization process. But the way we see it is that we do have different futures, so there will be still a strong competition amongst different technological alternatives. The climate agenda will increasingly influence international trade and international relations, as Professor Ronaldo pointed out. Brazil, since it has a great supply of renewable energy sources, we are in the position to play a bigger role in global decisions regarding energy, and that includes oil and gas, and that's how we are building our energy strategy. And our energy transition and net zero strategy will be based not only in renewable electricity, but also bioenergy, oil and gas, low carbon, hydrogen. So bioenergy is a strong basis for our decarbonization. It sets Brazil apart from most of the other countries. We will advance in electrification based on renewables, but to do that, we need natural gas to provide reliability to our system. Renewables, they are a blue chip for our hydrogen strategy, but natural gas also matters. That's why we actually started our hydrogen plan detailing our perspectives and potential for blue hydrogen, turquoise hydrogen, and lately this year, what we call dark green or moss green hydrogen, the hydrogen from biomass. And oil and gas is a key part of that equation, but to be and to remain a key part of our equation into the future, the oil and gas matrix the oil and gas industry has to reduce its carbon footprint. It has to increase energy efficiency. It has to develop strategies for carbon capture and migrate in time expertise towards lower carbon futures and renewables. And thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Elisa, it was very good to see that we have a clear path to decarbonize the oil and gas industry, and also to see the complementarity of the technologies on the energy system.
We have a plan. You may not agree with the plan, but we have a plan.
I believe that the majority will agree. Now we'll have Isabel. Isabel, please, the floor is yours. You can pass the slide.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Aker, Duarte, and it's an honor to be sharing here with Eloisa and Ronaldo. And thank you, Eloisa, for opening the floor for my presentation. So I think we are aligned, happily. And I'll show a little bit of the Petrobras decarbonization pathway, how we look at things. We understand we are a big energy supplier in Brazil, and we cannot think of ourselves without thinking of the Brazilian context, of the Brazilian reality and the Brazilian plans. So it all must be coordinated and aligned, and fortunately it is. And I would like to start just saying that Petrobras is a company that supports the Paris Agreement, and we believe in a world aligned with the Paris objectives. And therefore, we are working towards being a more efficient oil producer. That's meaning we call it decarbonized oil. And someone say, how? Like with less carbon in the oil? I'm like, okay, with a smaller carbon footprint on the production of such oil. So these are some of our climate commitments. I'd like to highlight number one. So we have a target to reduce in 25% the absolute emissions of the company by 2030. So we are not only working on efficiency, but actually on reducing total emissions. Number three, that we have the biggest CCUS program in the world. We've already reinjected 30 million tons of CO2, and we plan to reinject 40 million tons up to 2025, accumulated from 2009. And 4 and 5 are related to energy intensity in upstream and refining, and also methane. So we have these intensity commitments in our plans. And the biggest challenge is we want to be net zero scope 1 and 2. Scope 1 and 2 meaning our own operations, not the products we sell, by 2050. So it's like the Brazilian NDC. We are aligned. We'll get there. And how do we look at our decarbonization pathway? I think we have 5 pillars, and I'll present each of them for you. The first one is this, that when we look at the scenarios, even the most aggressive scenarios of the International Energy Agency, they still expect oil to have a significant demand in 2050. So here I bring the sustainable development scenario of the IEA, and you can see that we have around 50 million barrels of oil per day of oil demand. So going from something around 100 million barrels today to half of that. But it's still a big demand for oil. So we want to prepare ourselves to be able to supply the world with this oil. But what is this oil? First, if you're having shrinking demand, it's expected that you have lower prices. So our cost of production must be low, so that even if oil is at 40, we're able to make a profit and to produce oil that fits this price. So we call this double resilience, economic resilience. And the other point is you can't be producing 2050 oil that is dirty in the production process. So although it's going to be a hydrocarbon, it will be a hydrocarbon produced with a very clean process. So with net zero in your scope 1 and 2 throughout your production. So that's what we call double resilience. We want to have an oil that's economic resilient and also carbon resilient to be able to supply the oil of the future. Just for you to have an idea, the pre-salt oil, is 40% less intense than the world average. So we are already very well positioned. The second is natural gas. We produce natural gas in Brazil, and we understand that natural gas is critical for allowing Brazil to have the great energy matrix that Eloisa showed. So we have around 85% of renewables in our electric matrix. And but we know there's intermittencies, right? We all Brazilians have seen like, oh, this year wasn't very good on the rain, so we have to dispatch the thermal power plants run by gas. So we understand that gas is crucial to allow us for energy security with renewables. So that's an important role we understand we play. The other one is investing in low carbon products. So as Eloisa showed, it's not new in Brazil. We have a lot of low carbon products, ethanol, biodiesel, and we are investing in using our expertise on the refining segment, for example, to develop new carbons, new low carbon products. So for example, we have not biodiesel, but renewable diesel. Is we put bio oil into the processing plants of our refineries, and we generate a diesel that is similar to the fossil diesel, but with renewable content. We are looking at bio-KAV, which is biojet fuel for aviation, and we are looking how we can increase the production of these products in Brazil. But it's important to say that the cost of these products are still higher than the cost of fossil fuel products. So we have to align public policy to guarantee the right incentives to be put in place to scale up this kind of production. The other pillar is R&D. So we invest 10% of our R&D budget in low carbon solutions, and that's how we developed our CCUS technology. When we discovered the pre-salt, there was very high CO2 content, and we said, oh, we can't flare this CO2, so what to do? And in the end, something that was bad turned to be kind of a good thing, because now we reinject the CO2, and it helps us take more oil out of the reservoir, using less natural gas, which is a valuable project. So this was all done in our research center. I visited the lab. It's great how they find out the right pressure to put the CO2 that does help the oil flow better. High SAP, which is a high pressure separation in the bottom of the ocean, that reduces the energy need of the platform and can reduce carbon emissions of a system in up to 4%. So we are investing in trying to find these small things that summed can have big impact on our operations. And lastly, natural climate solutions. So we are sitting in Brazil, where most of the emissions come from deforestation and land use change. So we understand that we can't only look at the energetic issue, but we also have to tackle this challenge. So Petrobras already invests voluntarily in its corporate sustainability arm in 3% of the Brazilian territory in terms of preservation or reforestation. But now we are starting to do that to generate carbon credits, to possibly offset part of our emissions in the future. So we understand we are matching two things. And when we incorporate the forests as, let's say, part of the business, the amount of money you can put on that is much more significant. So I'm an enthusiastic of natural climate solutions. I think I participate in many international forums on that, and sometimes people say, no, but the oil and gas industry, they have to do their homework on efficiency, on new forms of energy, and like you don't have legitimacy to work on the forests. I'm like, but Brazil has 85% of its electric energy already renewable, while the Amazon is burning. So why should I be only looking at like more renewables in the energy matrix and let this happen? So I think we do have to look at that, and we intend to scale up NCS at Petrobras. And Floresta Viva project with BNDES was the first step, but we are looking at opportunities to enhance that. And this was my quick speech, so that we have some time for questions and answers.
Thank you,
Thank
Isabel.
you.
Thank you very much. And I can guarantee you, we have on this room several persons that are used to work with Petrobras, but I'm pretty sure that they never heard, Petrobras talking about, natural-based solutions, what is the decarbonization pathway. Thank you very much for the exposition. But let's start, to warm up a bit our discussion here. And I believe that let's try to be more concise now on the answers. But one of the things that we observe when we start to discuss energy transition is everyone agrees on the why we need it. But when we start to discuss how to do it, what are the instruments to be applied, which technologies needs to be deployed, and the professor touched upon all of the R&Ds that needs to be funded. Also, it's exactly when we start to have some, differences of opinions. And we strongly believe that, the collaboration between private sector and public sector, it's really key. And of course, having also the scientific community, helping all the entities on this transition. And here today on the forum, it's a question for the three of you. We have the opportunity to have three different lenses of the same shared objective. And my question to you is, in reality, it's two questions, okay? The first one is, what kind of strategies do you believe that needs to be followed by the public sector, private sector, and also the scientific community to accelerate this energy transition? And this is the first part of the question. The second part, and pretty connected, and I saw that Isabel and Eloise make a lot of questions about diversity during the visit in the morning, how this decarbonized world, let's say, this energy transition can connect and support the ESG and the Sustainable Development Agenda. Again, not only looking for the environmental aspects, but looking for the S, looking for diversity, social development, regional development. I would like to hear from you. Professor.
Well, hello. Well, we have already in Brazil, as I mentioned before, several pieces of legislations, decrees, program. I think they show several initiatives already in place in Brazil. And how do you do this to make this move faster and more integrated, more articulated? This is a challenge we have today in Brazil, okay? Although I think we show some good initiatives in the last 3 or 4 years, but you still have in Brazil a kind of dilemma about how much you should be low carbon or to be net zero. I don't think this is part of the political agenda. If you see the candidates for presidency in Brazil, they think they have more serious things to talk about than climate issues. Although I see the Brazilian productive sector very much engaged. I've been working for these bills and projects on carbon price in Brazil, and I saw, I think you saw already, the cooperative sector saying, please do a carbon price. Please do some policies on climate, because they believe what the Minister of the Economy said in your event in Jardim Botânico. It was, I thought I was in the United States looking the Biden government saying something like, no, we know. I think the point is, there is, you don't need more discussions if there is climate change, if the climate change is caused by anthropocentric sources. The point is the capital is already decarbonized. They decide to be low carbon. There is no way out. I'm sorry. So if the fossil fuel be 100, 45, 70, 30, that's not the issue. The issue is now competitiveness is based on climate issues. Of course, you may say, look, but climate is the only issue we've been talking about, perhaps deforestation. But deforestation is also a big issue. All the environmental issues is going to be important, but deforestation and climate is something which is a global knowledge, something which is affect all the global commons. So I think this is something we cannot avoid. And so Brazil is, for me, is very pleased to hear the Minister of Economy speaking with the Minister of Environment. I would not be surprised if Mr. Finance say something, but the Minister of Economy is saying that we needed to be ahead. Brazil needs to lead this net zero economy, and Brazil needs that for being competitive. And so I think this is very much auspicious, very much welcome. But you don't have this in practice. We're still struggling in the Congress and also in the federal government, and perhaps the subnational government, they are much more ahead. We don't have such a coherent and comprehensive policy. But I think we are getting there. I show you some pieces. Sometime we're going to wrap up this and have a Green Deal in Brazil. The second question is, that's also the same question we made for why should we care so much about climate. When you talk about ESG, I think most of the lectures and the webinars talk about the E. And I tell you, I have some experience on this field. It's much more difficult to deal with the S and the G, in particular the S. And so I see the green taxonomy in Europe. I think everybody is aware of this. No? So it's the way they codify how you present your information on climate. Now, next year is going to be biodiversity, and then is going to be social indicators. So I think climate somehow is pushing, okay, those issues on the arena.
Very good. Thank you, Professor. Luisa.
Oh, thank you. Hello, hello. Okay, thank you. I'll add up innovation. Decarbonization requires not only different ways to produce energy, but to use energy. The current crisis in Europe has shown that if you try to reduce energy demand just by telling people not to use energy, that will not go well. So we have to change the ways we produce energy and the ways we consume energy. That requires innovation. That requires still lots and lots and lots of R&D funds to develop new technologies, technologies that we do not have, or technologies that are yet not cost competitive yet, but also technologies that will help us use energy in a better way, or use different sources, different energy sources. For that, we cannot be afraid of making mistakes. A key point of innovation is that you are not afraid of making mistakes. All of you here that lead teams, if you tell your team that they cannot make mistakes, no one will give you a new idea, not even one person, because they will be so afraid of making a mistake that will not innovate. That it's also true for technology. We will make lots and lots of mistakes until getting one. I believe in your presentation this morning, you said the technology is being developed for 20 years. How many mistakes? How many, oh, let's start over again. Oh, that did not work. Let's go back. That's just, but then we'll have to try to make more mistakes to make it faster. So innovation is a key aspect of that, and that goes to the Sustainable Development Goals. Why? Because in order to innovate and decarbonize, we cannot look at the goals as, individual goals. You will not reach clean, affordable energy if you leave people behind. So clean, but on the other hand, we will not reach gender equality without clean, affordable energy. But because access to clean energy is a key aspect of enhancing diversity. In Brazil, for instance, we have our biofuel strategy. Our biofuel strategy is a key instrument to agriculture, for sustainable agriculture. For instance, the biodiesel program includes technological training for the families that produce the biofuels so that they can diversify their culture, their other cultures. And with that, they have more food, they enhance their household income together with the clean energy goals. So see, all the goals, they are interconnected. We will not reach one without reaching the other. So we have to stop thinking of them as individual goals. Of course, we have to have, it's like the ESG panel. You will not reach one without reaching the others. You have to look at the broader picture. So in order to reach a sustainable world, we need innovation. In order to get innovation, we need clean energy, but we also need diversity. We need growth. We need, to give people ways to start. We have to think about a fair transition. You cannot leave half of the population behind just because you want to give clean energy for the other half of the population. So lots of things to consider.
Let's connecting what you are saying, we have here one question from Fernanda Delgado from EBP. It is how to protect the society on this discussion, how to give them knowledge, education, and to understand how to get along with these new public policies. Can you elaborate on that a bit, Luisa?
Well, I'll start by saying that you have to think about society. You have to think and plan ahead for a fair transition. A transition based on solutions that require higher prices and will leave part of the population behind, it's not sustainable, right? But on the other hand, we have to think about the new capabilities that people will need, and here you have, you are starting to do that. So you think about a specific capability that we will need in order to reach our clean energy goals in 2030, 2050. How do we prepare our society to build up and to be able to provide that capabilities in the future? How to educate them, for instance, with energy efficiency? We all have learned, I hope you've all have learned, to close to brush your teeth, closing the sink, right?
Mm-hmm.
To save water. When you leave the room, turn off the light to save light. That's energy efficiency happening. So start thinking about, when should I wash my clothes? For me, I just think when I have time, if the next day is going to be sunny, because otherwise it won't dry. But what if I think about turning on the washing machine when the energy is cheaper, or when I am producing energy with a low carbon content? What if I think about that? What if I start educating my society and giving them information? For instance, RenovaBio, EPE, and I will start. I will finish. The Energy Research Office, we have an app only for those of you who do not have iPhones, because it's, I forgot the name, the other operational system, but we have Android system, but we have an app, it's called Renova app, which will tell you, you put your car model, year, and fuel, we will give you your carbon footprint, how much carbon you are saving from the atmosphere if you choose ethanol instead of gasoline. So you empower the consumer to make those decisions.
Very good, thank you, Elisa. So coming back to the strategies that needs to be followed by the public and private sector, and also the SG agenda, what is your view on that?
Um, yes, I fully agree with Professor Ronaldo that the private sector, the corporates are supporting uh, public policies, regulations, because we already have pressure coming from other stakeholders. I'm an example. I worked for 17 years in the investor relations team of Petrobras. And I joined the climate change team because they said, do you know, most of our climate pressure come from investors. So come join us so we understand better their view, what they are willing. So we have our commitments, our goals. We have pressure coming from investors, from consumers, from partners. I can't imagine like trying to put a project in place that would burn the CO2 that comes out of the reservoir instead of doing CCUS and inviting Equinor to join me, and they would be like, oh, good idea, I love this project. So partners and the society in general. So, and therefore we're putting our commitments, but it's good for all of us if public policy and regulation comes along, because it gives us certainty that the regulation won't come in a different way from what we've been doing, that we are aligned, or that our efforts are enough. So, and of course, public policy enables things to happen, like CCUS needs carbon pricing to be feasible. So we support, and we want to build together with the public sector to make sure things are aligned and they will deliver the future we need, because what we live today is the result of public policies that were chosen in the past. So I think it's important. And the S part of the ESG, I think, is the most difficult one. I was reading, like, we have the population of the world will grow by 2 billion people until 2050, which is the year that we all look at, from 7.7 to 9.7. We still have 10% of the global population without access to electricity. Energy exclusion is huge. So we're thinking about all these more like carbon-free energy, but it must be inclusive. It must, like in Brazil, I always touch upon that we have to look at oil and think, we were discussing on the way walking here, like how the oil and gas industry creates jobs, and there's a whole environment around it. The taxation impact of the oil and gas industry. There are states, governments in Brazil that live on this income. So like it all has to be looked and put together so that the transition doesn't leave anyone behind, is inclusive, respect, like cost of energy. We are in Brazil discussing the price of fuels, is big theme, because the cost of energy impacts our everyday life. So it's too complex. I don't have the answer. I just look at it and think it must be done, but it must be done in a very responsible way and fair, and it's difficult. I live, EPE will bring us the
No, very good.
good
But
answer.
coming back to Professor Ronaldo, because we have here, two questions. I will try to package in one question. That one, it's related. In your opinion, what are the one or two main factors that will make the carbon market successful in Brazil? And the other question connected to that, it was a bit what we discussed during the lunch, that it was, if you believe that a more integrated carbon market globally will be an option to reduce competitiveness impact to the different targets in the different regions,
Well, to be successful in Brazil means to be enforceable. Okay, I don't know how much. I don't know how many Brazilians are here.
are the majority, don't worry.
Okay, for the foreign people, I tell you, in Brazil, we're very good a very good lawmaker, but a very bad behavior. Abiding by the law is not the case. Applying the law, implementing the law, okay, and then the second, enforcing the law. But anyway, Why I'm saying that? Because it's very important. That's I like very much the way we discuss in Brazil carbon market, because it was 5-6 years of discussing studies with the specialists, with the cooperative sector, with the government, and so we came up with something which was already acceptable for everyone. So I believe if you make true that kind of view, you'll be able to have something very enforceable, implementable in Brazil. But we need to correct some parts of this bill. The first one is how do you decide the sectoral targets? So we need for carbon price. Carbon price is a consequence. Pricing is a consequence of the target. Whatever your target, you'll be a different price setting. Suppose Europe now is 55 target. Of course, the price has gone up.
Mm-hmm.
Other things change because the way the rules of the game there change a bit. But anyway, it's 64, 90. Brazil doesn't need to be a price like 60, 40, or $80 per ton. With $10 per ton, you can make most of your reduction in energy efficiency and reduce and keep up our level of energy intensity, carbon intensity in the economy. And then comes to the second question, how can I make this linkage between two markets? First of all, we cannot do it. It's very few cases. So you see, Europe and Switzerland. Oh, come on. Europe and Swiss, okay?
Mm-hmm.
California and Quebec, again. Why do they have that? Because the small jurisdiction, they benefit from that. It doesn't cause much harm in the major one. But when you put together Brazil, Europe, United States, that everybody together, how the price is going to change? And the price is going to be the leading factor for deciding investments and also creating all the restrictions and the macroeconomic consequences. So each country is going to have a different tax, a different price, equilibrium price. That's the reason the economists, like me, working in this kind of exchange rate for carbon price. How can you make an exchange rate system which can make possible that kind of linkage? Or you could go for a different situation, which is, I think, is more complex, but some people are working on that, compensation. All the money goes for a fund, and so you distribute that fund from the carbon taxation, the carbon market actions, sales, and then you compensate countries which don't need to have such a high price, okay? But that's very difficult. I don't see that happening very soon, but I've been failing with my foreign questions, so perhaps you may have this, I don't know, they have now a carbon club, and suppose Brazil has a market, the other big country has a market, they may be willing to make some kind of connection.
Very good. Thank you, Professor. We have here one question that I believe that it's pretty well connected, Luisa, to your provocation in the beginning, that the future will be a future with hydrocarbons. And the question is, globally, the oil and gas companies are being considered the bad guys on climate change by the media activism. What will be the recommendation, to change that perspective? It's a matter of, educating the people as you provided to us here today. What is your thought on that? Let's try to make some concise answers to give time, because it's a lot of questions.
Yeah, concisão, not my fault. But, okay, I think it's a mistake to look at oil and gas as part of the problem, because they are part of the solution. We will not reach a decarbonized future without oil and gas. Not only because we need hydrocarbons, because for countries as Brazil, we need income. Oil and gas, you do not have sustainable development without economic growth. It's true for Brazil, for Norway, for the United States, for many, many countries. So it's just looking from an objective perspective is just, a bad strategy. But then you have to go back to the climate activists and try to explain that. Okay, since they're not the bad guys, how do you explain without sounding patronizing and without incurring in greenwashing? It's hard. The only answer I have is look at the numbers. Try to be agnostic and look at things from an agnostic perspective. So when you're not choosing sides, when you're not in a soccer field, let's play frescobol. Do you know frescobol, for those who are not from Brazil?
Probably not.
Frescobol is a game we play here in Brazil at the beach. It's kind of like tennis, but the goal is not letting the ball fall. So you do not play against each other. You play with the other person, because you're not the only way you win if it's the other person wins. You're not competing. You're collaborating. That's what we need. We need to sit with a collaborative perspective at the table, and that requires an agnostic point of view. You know, leave your teams, leave Flamengo and Vasco and Botafogo and América Mineiro outside the room.
Don't think with your heart, think with your head. Definitely.
Yes.
Very good. Excellent. We have here, again, several questions to Isabel. I will try, the majority of them, it's related with low carbon solutions. And two perspectives. One, if you see, for instance, like a project, because you mentioned ICEP and also CCUS, if you see a project like Northern Lights, to be here implemented in Brazil, and also to elaborate a bit better on the importance of the ICEP. And by the way, we have some persons that are working on ICEP on the audience. This is why they are interested to understand a bit the importance of ICEP for Petrobras.
Okay. Yes, regarding CCUS, we currently use CCUS for enhanced oil recovery only. That's meaning we reinject it in the reservoir to help the oil flow better. But we are studying CCUS as hubs as well. So we have here Leonardo. He sits in the OGCI. OGCI is the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. Is a coalition of the 12 big oil companies to look for climate solutions together. And he sits in the CCUS work stream of OGCI, where we exchange expertise, ideas, technologies. So he's sitting with Equinor, with Shell, with Total, the ones that are putting Northern Lines in place, learning from their experience. And he even visited Northern Line 2 weeks ago with OGCI. And OGCI has hired a study, a white paper on CCUS hubs in Brazil. Where would the demand, the CO2 production, like the big CO2 hubs are, where the reservoir is, which are the transportation infrastructure necessary, where it would go through, what are the necessary public policies involved, carbon pricing or subsidies. And so we hope to have this study ready in some months to have this good picture of the CCUS framework in Brazil. Petrobras is also studying a kind of CCUS project with existing infrastructure. So we would take CO2 from a refinery, put in existing pipeline, and reject in a depleted reservoir. This was a gas reservoir that was sending natural gas to the refinery, but the reservoir is shut now. So we could reverse logistics. So we are studying that. So we're enthusiastic of CCUS beyond EOR. And we hope, but we know costs are still high, and I think that's still a challenge. And the other is HICEP. So we are very enthusiastic of HICEP because I don't have numbers, but I can share with the ones that are more interested. But as we go deeper in the pre-salt, we have higher oil and gas ratio, so we have higher CO2 content. So our platforms have become bigger, and heavier, and with more energy demand. So it's been an engineering challenge to be able to put in place such HAV systems with so many processing plants on it. So if we are able to take out some of these processing plants and put them in the bottom of the ocean, which is what HISEP intends to do, you save a lot of space in the system. You save a lot of energy to bring things up, process there, and take them down again. So as I said, we estimate HISEP can save up to 4% of the energy demand of FPSO, of the whole system, which is huge for us. And I think it's we are testing HISEP in one of our fields, and I think it's one of those technologies that will fly, because yeah, sometimes technology errors are allowed, and sometimes good ones appear.
Very good, thank you, Isabel. Before to go to the final considerations, I have one more question for you, Isabel. That is, you know, it's connected what we discussed also to the lunch, that the scope 3 is one of the most difficult scopes to tackle. But let's not elaborate too much on the scope 3, but what is the, you know, the expectation of Petrobras towards the value chain, you know, when we talk about emissions? What do you expect from the value chain?
Yes, so we, like, of course, when suppliers have their emissions, we incorporate these emissions in our own inventories. So it's very important for us to engage the supplier value chain, the upper value chain, in becoming more efficient, because we can. This also reflects in our inventories. So we have now in the Petrobras carbon neutral program a pillar dedicated to the supply chain, to see how can we put incentives, for example, in our contracts or in our biddings, so that the one that has a lower carbon footprint wins the bid, for example. That's a differential on the hiring process. So we are trying to help to develop ways to help the supply chain decarbonize. And we have our products. And that's a question that we get a lot, but are you still only investing in oil? We see a lot of diversification in other oil companies. We are studying, we have created a corporate governance to study what we call profitable diversification. We want to find new businesses that are profitable, that are sustainable. And we have a sense that this business could be something that is aligned with the competencies we have, which are high technology, engineering process, big projects with capital intense, maybe offshore, because that's something we are used to. So we are looking at offshore wind, we are looking at hydrogen, but we haven't found it. I can't say like, oh, we have found the other thing that Petrobras can do and can do well. But we are putting efforts. We came out from a very difficult financial situation in the last years, where we were actually focusing on just recovering the company. And now we're in a very safe and sound financial situation, and I think we can look at the future in a longer perspective, with more open-mindedness, and not be so attached to the financial return as we had to be.
The balance.
Yeah. So we expect to bring more view on that by the end of the year, when we release our new business plan. We've been working on these, but we still don't have the answer of how the Petrobras of the long future will look like.
But I can guarantee you that when this time comes, Aker will be prepared to make the biddings with Petrobras. But let's go for the final considerations. And you know, as we spent the last couple of hours, listening many scenarios, many technologies, it makes me wonder, how will be that discussion that we are having here in, 10 to 15 years time, Please try to, give an answer of 1 minute, what the future looks like in terms of energy transition in 10, 15 years time. How will be that discussion in 10, 15 years time? We'll start with you, Professor.
Well, I hope you will not say, I said so. Well, in 10 years can be?
10 years.
Okay, I
enough.
think you will be also struggling with inclusiveness in 10 years' time. I think that will be the major issue for this transition, is how to take care of inclusiveness in all those changes, because a lot of structural adjustment will be needed, and some people may lose with that change.
Very good. Thank you, Professor. Luisa.
Do you have vinyl disco players?
I have.
Do you have DVDs? Oh, you haven't. No, you're a good person to ask. Do you have DVDs? You're a bad person to ask. Yeah, I had to explain my kids what DVDs were. I actually did. I said something about, oh, let's get a DVD. And they looked at me and they said, what's a DVD? They didn't know. But back when I was taking my PhD, I remember that the Blu-ray was the next big thing. And I was at the US, so on a Black Friday, I bought this huge Bose sound system with a Blu-ray attached. Everything was going to work out. It was going to be great. 2 years later, Netflix was a thing. And my great sound system with the Blu-ray thing and the 3D TV was completely obsolete in 2 years. So, but Netflix knew that's going to happen. Someone saw that future building when nobody else was seeing. Netflix started as a DVD by mail renting company. They started thinking ahead and thinking, what would happen if instead of shipping people the physical DVD, I develop a system that allows them to rent online as soon as the technology allows. And since they had that, when the technology was there, they started doing streaming. And they moved from individual rentals to a signature strategy, and there went my investment in the Blu-ray. The thing is, 10 years from now, everything could happen. Or we could we could be in the future that we are seeing. One thing I do know, we will decarbonize because we have no other we have no other escape. We are already doing that. The point is, each country in 10 years we will still be in the place where each country will be doing their own thing. So some countries will probably be capturing carbon and storing because that's what makes sense for them. Some countries will be having biofuels. Some countries will have natural gas. Some countries will do electrical everything. We will still have, in 10 years, we will still have lots of different solutions because energy transition is a marathon. It's a 30-year, 40-year plan, and we'll probably diverge before conversing,
Yes.
converging into something.
Very good. Thank you, Elisa. Isabel, your final considerations, please.
Yes, in 10 years, anything can happen, but I hope we'll have a carbon market pretty good developed in Brazil, and Professor Ronaldo will be showing up how prices have been behaving the last months. I hope we'll have a CCUS hub in Brazil somewhere working with Aker, Christmas trees, reinjecting some CO2.
I like that feature.
You like? We'll still have we'll have all electric platforms with high SAP technology on the pre-salt with very low carbon intensity in the oil production. Yes, we'll be flying with some biojet fuel produced by Petrobras in its refineries. Yeah, I think I can.
It's
Yeah,
a good
I
feature.
can see good things in the future.
Sounds a very nice future, Isabel. Quite promising, I would say.
Thank
But
you.
these definitely are conversations that could keep having for a while. But you know, our time now is it's limited. But it's impressive, you know, the number of topics that we can continue to engage with several agents, and hopefully we'll continue to engage with several agents on this discussion. You know, and I would really like to thank all the audience, of course, but a special thanks to, you know, Professor Ronaldo, Luisa, and also Isabel for this session. I believe it was fantastic. At least for me, it was an amazing learning afternoon. Thank you very much. And I will pass the word now to our Senior Vice President, Volmir, just to, you know, close the forum and also to close the event of the day.
Pode falar? Thank you, Duarte. And it's, as you said, it has been amazing, really a great learning today, this afternoon. And I thank you so much, Professor Ronaldo Ceroa, Heloísa Borges, Isabel Ramos, for being with us today, for sharing your knowledge. It's really great and really amazing. And thank you, Duarte, for organizing this forum. Great organization, excellent debates, and good. Thank you all. Once we are running a bit out of time, so first I hope you have enjoyed this day. I have enjoyed a lot. I have learned a lot. So thank you for being with us. I think they deserve applause from us, right? Because they did great. And I just would like, again, to thank you. And I need to pronounce a sentence here that I have listened several times. Is the decarbonized future does not mean a future without hydrocarbon, right? But I listened first from Fernanda, and several times I would say. Now I think you are contaminating the world with this sentence, and we will start to repeat all the time. Yeah. You are the first. That's what I'm trying to discover. Okay, good.
We have IP rights here, okay?
That's amazing. And that's, again, thank you so much. I hope you have a safe trip back home, and I hope to see you soon, and we continue to enhance our collaboration going forward, because we need that in order to reach a future, decarbonized future, a low carbon footprint. So thank you all for being with us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Muito bom. Muito bom. Muito bom.
Obrigada, Duarte. Obrigada.
Não, eu é que agradeço. Vamos tirar uma foto, ó. Vamos tirar aqui uma foto.